one thing I've noticed is, high growth agencies, they are really, really paying attention to working on their business rather than working in their business.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Lindsay. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. We are through some of our home stretch of travel up until the wedding for me. I know you've got at least one more, but it feels good to be home.
Does feel good to be home, I will tell you that. Feels good to be home. Feels good to be catching up on some work. Feeling like I'm going to head into April with, head into May. We were already done with April. I feel like I'm going to close out April strong and head into May with, some momentum, which is really exciting. I can't believe we're almost halfway through the year. Oh, that makes me a little sad, but it's all good.
I know. It's all right, though. Well, as we've been traveling, I've been really trying to be a sponge and soak up, questions from agencies, trying to soak up what they're doing and, learn from them, because I think there's a lot of learning that can come from listening to the people who are actually doing it,
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've noticed is, high growth agencies, they are really, really paying attention to working on their business rather than working in their business. And there's almost a key distinction between the two of those two groups of agencies of, all right, I'm really focused on the business, or I'm really focused on writing business.
Right.
Don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely do. That becomes even more apparent when you sit inside a mastermind and people are talking about working on the business versus, maybe doing some valuations or doing some other work that maybe it's hard to pick your head up and think about how to work on the business. So I would agree with that. And we've had some exposure to some great people that are discussing how they are working on it, not just in it. And it's refreshing to hear that, but also becomes so obvious how difficult doing that is in a small business. I'm a small business owner, and I will tell you it's difficult for me to do it. My heart goes out to anybody who's trying to straddle that and figure that balance out. But yes, I fully agree with you. There's a very distinct difference.
Yeah. And something else I've really been reflecting on is agencies are so good at looking into their clients' risks, but they really, and I think it's almost like it's hard to, edit your own paper.
Yeah.
They struggle to identify their own risks until you tell them. Like we just, for the listeners, we just ran a workshop where one of the activities we did during the workshop was a risk assessment. Mm-hmm. And so we put all of the key risk indicators. I'm happy to send it to anyone who's listening. Just shoot me an email or shoot me a message on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to send you the link. And so it went through all the risk factors that your agency has, and it had them score themselves from 1 to 5. And some of the agencies in the room when we did it were almost shocked at themselves. And they were asking, okay, well, hey, can I ask the group, what did I score on this? Or what did you guys score on that? Because, if 1 is really good and 5's really bad, I gave myself a 2, but that's not even something I've ever thought about. Is that normal? Are other agencies doing that? If you scored yourself a 5 is good, or whatever, if you scored yourself good on it, how do you do that? And I found that really interesting that there were risk factors. I mean, these are risk advisors we're talking to. They're in insurance agencies, and they weren't thinking about their own risk like that. That was, so interesting to me. Do you find that to be super common?
I do. I mean, we do a fair number of evaluations a year, and when we review it, that actually highlights some of these risk factors. And it's funny that, people said, I never really looked at my business that way, or I hadn't thought about it that way, and hadn't thought about if and when we want to transition internally, or if and when we want to sell, or if I was going to a bank in order to get a loan to acquire, I didn't realize that this would look risky to someone else. It's just the way we are. Meaning, it's tough. You're going through the day to day. You're not actually looking at some of these key indicators that tell you what your risk is. The biggest thing from that discussion was, that whole workshop was about positioning yourself to be a buyer, and starting with looking at your own agency and making sure that you're well positioned to be as healthy as you possibly can, get your profitability as tight as it can, and position yourself so when you go to get a loan to acquire, or when you go, you know exactly what your risks are. You can compare it to the agency that you're looking at and make sure, A, it's the right fit for you. It doesn't exacerbate your risks more, and it complements your agency. So that was the whole purpose of doing the risk assessment. But when they came back and said, I thought I was doing pretty darn good. And now when I came back, I had several areas where I was a 4 or a 5 when, I'd never really thought about it. Do you remember the number one area that agency owners in the room wanted to know how other people scored? Do you remember what the question was, Lindsay?
I don't actually remember what the question was.
Yeah.
Which one
So
is
it was retention. We're in the middle of a hard market, and new business and growth and rate increases. That number, everybody felt pretty solid about. But what is your retention rate, and how would you score yourself from policy retention, customer retention, revenue retention, and premium retention? And some said, it's really difficult for them to, number one, track it. And number two, they didn't think that they were doing as well as what the industry average was for retention from a policy and customer standpoint, which makes sense. We're in the middle of a hard market.
Absolutely.
Lots of movement from one carrier to the other. There's people that are shopping. It is definitely something to be aware of, but it's also something difficult to track because your agency management system isn't necessarily set up to make that calculation easy. But it's also, if your processes are not tight and you're not catching all of the rewrites, your new business and your retention can actually be skewed and your number could be completely off. The reality is that metric, knowing your retention from a customer standpoint, a policy standpoint, a revenue standpoint, is so incredibly important to the health of an agency, because it tells you where you need to focus your effort. And that ongoing renewable revenue or ongoing recurring revenue is what drives the value of an agency and how predictable it is. So if you don't know what it is, and then you haven't dug into why it's higher or lower than the average, it's really difficult to be sure that that is something that is predictable inside your agency. So to me, that's one of the most important numbers besides knowing your
retention.
profitability and what your potential profitability of your agency could be.
Yeah. So one thing I was thinking about when we were in that session is, because we've talked about this before, that the risk factors, there are some that are way more important than others, right? And across all of them. Our last podcast was on concentration. And we haven't done culture yet in a podcast format, and we haven't done the other one, which I'm blanking on.
Performance.
When you're doing evaluation, or our team is doing evaluation, what are the most important ones? Like, what are and this is important for me, and it's important for agencies who are looking to buy other agencies, to say, really, in a health checkup type format, some of the, like, what would be a sign that an agency might not be as healthy as it looks on paper?
Well, the two most impactful metrics or risk factors inside an agency are growth and profitability. Is the agency growing? What's driving the growth? And is it profitable? So that predictability of that growth is incredibly important. Are they generating new business? are they holding on to their book, are the two numbers that go into that growth number. All the other risk factors are predictors of or indicators of how predictable the agency's ongoing performance will be. So if you think about it, concentration by producer could indicate that ongoing new business might be at risk if it's concentrated with one person and that person leaves the agency. Concentration of a carrier could change what the ongoing retention commission could be if that carrier changed their commission structure. Retention of the book could change if you don't have policies in place, or you have a team that the demographic is all of your CSRs or account managers are at retirement age. Like there's lots of things that are indicators to say, can we with certainty or with a lot of certainty say that it is not as risky as another agency, that the agency's performance will continue. But growth and profitability are really, really important. And then really the health of the book becomes part of that, and the overall performance. Do we have high loss ratios? That would impact the ability to have contingency income and impact the profitability. But every one of those risk factor kind of ties back to, can it grow and can it do it profitable? And is it predictable that it'll continue to operate the way that it's operating today?
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. I want this to be a quick one. And there's been so much, I feel like we've already chatted about with growth, profitability, retention, different risk factors. If someone's listening to this and they're overwhelmed, because I just wrote an entire newsletter that was, based off of a question we had with a prospective CFO client, that they said, listen, I can look at my financials and I understand them. I don't need you to look at my financials and explain them to me, but I need you to help me understand how to invest. Like, where am I missing the boat? I really want to grow, but this is a blind spot for me. So I understand it, but I don't necessarily know what to do with it. If someone is listening to this and they're like, okay, yeah, I understand it, but I'm not yet to the point where I'm fully working on the business. I'm still kind of in the business and they're a little bit overwhelmed. Where would you tell them to start, other than just coming and engaging us to be a CFO? Because you could do that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think I give them the same advice that I give myself, which is find space, like literally prioritize the space to work on your business, not just do the work day to day. So I think you have to be intentional about finding the space. And whether for you that means start delegating some of the work, make sure that it's all not dependent on you. Figure out how you spend your day and which things in your day don't need to be done by you. They're not the highest and best. I mean, as the owner, you are the most expensive person inside your agency, unless you've got a killer producer, and God love you. If you've got a producer making more, that means you're growing, gangbusters, or your comp structure's off. But you know what I mean? Like, I want you to have a producer that's making a ton of money, but all other things being equal, you're the most expensive person. So think about every single task that you do within your day. Should you be the one doing it? And if you can delegate it to someone else and create capacity to think about, how do we rethink our team? How do we utilize technology to get efficient? How do we focus the agency in order to drive profitability and growth? Where do I want to be in the next 5 years? To contemplate those kinds of things, I think you have to create space and get super intentional about it. I just facilitated a mastermind, and I had 3 really great speakers come in and talk to that mastermind group. And one of them was Billy Wagner, and he basically talked about becoming the CEO of your agency. And one of the things he basically said was, I do that first. I think about the business first. That is the number one thing on my list every single day. And then I go to the other tasks of my day. So prioritizing it. But it took a long time to get there. I'm not oversimplifying this, but it is really about intentionality. I try to do that. I get up early and do the stuff that's on the business as early as possible. So Teams isn't open, email isn't open, nobody's calling me hopefully at 4 a.m. Like it is those kinds of things that I think cause you to then get really, really smart. I'm also a financial person. So when I'm sitting in a room and I have, 6 of our team members talking about something, it's really hard for me to not calculate what that hour is costing us. And is it a good use of time? Think about that for yourself. Like, would I actually pay someone else the amount of money that it's taking you to do this? And if you wouldn't, you should delegate it, stop doing it, reallocate it, whatever the word is, but you've got to stop doing it because you wouldn't make that investment. And I think time is something that's easy to not look at as a dollar amount. But as soon as you do that, it becomes really clear what you should and shouldn't do.
I completely agree.
I wish that I took my advice as well as I could give it, just so you know. Yeah.
One of the things that have been really big on my mind, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts by Alex, and I think his last name is Hermisey, Alex Hermisey. And he's really big on every time you say yes to something, you are devaluing every other time you've said yes.
Yeah.
And that is something that is super, super big in my head. Like every time you take on a new task or do this or do that, you are devaluing the time that you have to work on the agency or do this or that. So that is something I think about every single day when I'm, oh, but we could do this, but we could do this. Well, is that actually, something we should be doing? Is it a distraction or is it really actually pushing forward any other yeses that I've made to myself?
When I think of this, Lindsay, I had an agency owner, a really, really great agency owner, basically gave me some advice because I was, going 100 miles an hour with my hair on fire. And he basically, I hate the word busy, but basically he knew I was stretched for time. And he said, Carey, just keep this in mind. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And I think I'm wired to want to help. I think people are wired to, as agency owners, you want to help your customers. You want to do as much as you possibly can. That could actually be your downfall, which is one of the best things about you, could be the downfall. So anyway, think about it. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, in promise to keep this short, this one's under 20 minutes. I really like how we've been doing these shorter episodes. I hope the listeners are liking it too. If you aren't, message me on LinkedIn and tell me. And
if you aren't, please let us know. That's right. Yeah, it's funny.
All right. Well, thank you very much for jumping on this morning in some of your early hour time to chat with me, and we'll be back again soon.
All right. See you soon.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.